Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
When my ex-husband announced he was marrying my sister, I thought nothing could shock me more, until they sat me down and offered to buy my unborn child for the family's sake. That's when I realized how twisted things had really become. When Anna called and invited me over for dinner, I thought it would be a welcome break from my usual routine. At 5 months pregnant, I was exhausted from balancing work, preparing for the baby, and adjusting to life on my own. Since my split with Luke, my ex-husband, I'd kept my focus on moving forward. Things between us were cordial but distant, and I was okay with that. Anna, my younger sister, had been my rock through the whole ordeal. She'd been there for the tear-filled late-night calls, the awkward moments of sorting out the divorce papers, and even the first time I'd felt the baby kick. She was my lifeline. So, when she invited me over for dinner, I didn't hesitate. When I walked into her dining room and saw Luke sitting at the table, my stomach dropped. He glanced up, looking just as surprised as I felt, but he quickly masked it with a tight-lipped smile. I hesitated for a moment, gripping the strap of my bag like a lifeline. Why was he here? Anna hadn't mentioned this would be a group dinner. "Hey, come in," Anna said brightly, oblivious, or pretending to be. "We're just about to sit down." Plastering on a smile, I slid into a chair across from Luke. "Hi," I said stiffly, avoiding his eyes. He nodded, his usual calm demeanor giving nothing away. The meal started off as a masterclass in awkward small talk. Anna asked me about work and how I was feeling, throwing in a few comments about the baby to keep the conversation going. Luke chimed in occasionally, asking polite questions about my doctor's appointments or if I'd started decorating the nursery. It was almost worse than if he'd said nothing. The tension was thick, and I noticed Anna and Luke exchanging glances throughout the meal. It was subtle at first, a shared look, a small nod, but by the time dessert was served, their nervous energy was undeniable. Anna finally cleared her throat, breaking the strained silence. "So," she began, her voice too bright, "we have something to tell you." I froze, my fork hovering midair. I looked between them, suddenly feeling like an outsider in a conversation I hadn't agreed to join. Anna reached across the table and took Luke's hand. "Luke and we're engaged." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We're getting married," she said, her words rushing out like she needed to get them over with. The room spun. I stared at their clasped hands, then at Anna's face, searching for some sign that this was a cruel joke. But she looked serious, nervous, yes, but serious. Luke, on the other hand, avoided my gaze entirely. "You're what?" I managed to say, my voice shaking. Anna leaned forward, her tone pleading. "It wasn't planned. I swear. It just happened after you and Luke broke up. We didn't mean for it to happen this way." The blood pounded in my ears. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Had it started while Luke and I were still together? Had Anna been comforting me while secretly seeing him behind my back? I started, but I couldn't finish the sentence. My throat felt tight, and my chest ached with the weight of their betrayal. Luke finally spoke, his voice calm and measured, like he was trying to defuse a bomb. "We didn't want to hurt you," he said, "but we thought you deserved to hear it from us." I let out a hollow laugh. "Oh, well, thanks for that. I feel so much better knowing you decided to play happy family and thought to clue me in at the last minute." "Please don't make this harder than it has to be," Anna said, her eyes welling up. "We love each other, and we want your support." I stared at her, incredulous. "You want my support?" After this, the room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I couldn't sit there any longer. Grabbing my bag, I stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't do this," I said, my voice trembling. "I need to leave." Anna started to rise. "Wait, please, let's talk about this." But I was already walking out the door, her voice fading behind me. As I got into my car and slammed the door shut, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. My ex-husband and my sister were engaged. The betrayal felt like a knife to the chest. Anna, the person I trusted most, had done this. Luke, the man I once loved, had done this. And now, I was carrying a piece of him inside me, a baby that would forever tie me to this tangled mess. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, as tears streamed down my face. I didn't know how I was going to face them again, or if I even could. All I knew was that everything had just changed, and there was no going back. The moment the words left Anna's mouth, my whole body felt numb. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was too stunned to feel anything but disbelief. The betrayal didn't fully register until I was in my car, driving home. The headlights blurred through my tears as my mind raced with questions I didn't want to answer. How long had this been going on? Was it while Luke and I were still together? Had I been so blind that I missed all the signs? Anna, my sister. She wasn't just my sibling. She was my best friend, my confidant, the person I called when my life fell apart. After Luke and I split, she had been the one to pick me up off the floor. I could still hear her voice late at night, soothing me through my sobs. You're going to get through this. You're stronger than you think. And all the while, she was sneaking around with him? When I got home, I collapsed onto the couch and stared at the wall. My mind kept replaying their announcement. Anna's hand clasped in Luke's like it was the most natural thing in the world. My stomach churned at the memory. The betrayal wasn't just Luke's. It was Anna's too, and somehow, that made it so much worse. The next morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly. I ignored it at first, but when it didn't stop, I finally picked it up. Sure enough, there were several missed calls and texts, some from Anna, some from Luke. Anna's messages started off apologetic. Please talk to me. I know you're upset, but I never wanted to hurt you. Can we meet? I want to explain everything. Then they shifted to defensive. You can't just shut me out like this. I'm still your sister. You're not being fair. I love him and I can't help that. Luke's messages were no better. I know you're mad, and you have every right to be, but I didn't plan this. It just happened. Anna and we clicked. I can't explain it, but it feels right. Clicked? Clicked? I stared at the screen in disbelief, my hands trembling with rage. They clicked while I was piecing my life back together, while I was navigating divorce papers and figuring out how to raise a child on my own. I threw my phone across the room, the sound of it hitting the carpet oddly satisfying. How dare they reduce my pain to something as trivial as we clicked? That afternoon, my mom called. I hesitated before answering, dreading what she might say. I heard about last night, she said cautiously. Anna told me. Of course she had. Anna was probably spinning the story to make herself the victim. I don't want to talk about it, I said flatly. Honey, I know you're hurt, but maybe you should give her a chance to explain. She said. I don't care what she said. I snapped, my voice shaking. She's marrying my ex-husband, Mom. My ex-husband. There's no explanation that makes that okay. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When my mom finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. I'm not saying what she did was right, but shutting her out won't help. You two are sisters. That bond matters. I ended the call shortly after that, unable to stomach any more. The bond my mom was talking about felt irreparably broken. Anna wasn't just my sister anymore. She was the woman who had shattered my trust. In the days that followed, I kept replaying every moment of the past year, looking for signs I might have missed. I remembered the times Anna had casually asked about Luke, the nights she dropped by unexpectedly, claiming she just wanted to check on me. Were those visits really about me? Or had she been looking for excuses to see him? The worst part was knowing I couldn't escape Luke completely. He was still the father of my unborn child. No matter how much I wanted to cut him out of my life, he'd always be tied to me through this baby. The thought made my skin crawl. I tried to focus on the pregnancy, on the small joys of feeling the baby kick and imagining the life I wanted to create for us. But the betrayal lingered in the background, a constant ache that wouldn't go away. One night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a text from Anna popped up on my phone. I love you. Please don't shut me out forever. For the first time, I didn't feel anger when I read her words. I felt hollow. Anna might love me, but her actions had shown that love wasn't enough. I turned off my phone and rolled over, clutching my belly. It's just us now, I whispered to the baby. I'll protect you no matter what. Even as I said the words, I knew this wasn't over. Luke and Anna weren't going to let this go. And as much as I wanted to shut them out forever, the baby's impending arrival meant I had to face them eventually. But not yet. For now, I needed to figure out how to pick up the pieces of my heart and decide what kind of future I wanted, for myself and for my child. After that disastrous dinner, my pregnancy felt like it existed in a vacuum. Before, I'd imagined Anna being there every step of the way, shopping for baby clothes, helping me choose names, or just sitting with me on the tough days when I felt like I was drowning. But now, even the thought of hearing her voice made my stomach turn. Her texts came almost daily, alternating between apologies and pleas to work things out. I ignored every single one. Luke, on the other hand, was harder to avoid. He was still the father of my baby, after all, and he wasn't going to let me forget it. He sent regular messages asking about my health, the baby's progress, and upcoming appointments. While part of me appreciated his effort to stay involved, his presence felt hollow, performative, even. When he showed up to one of my doctor's appointments uninvited, I almost lost it. I was sitting in the waiting room, flipping through an outdated magazine, when he walked in like he belonged there. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice low and sharp. "I wanted to be here for the ultrasound," he said, sitting down next to me like it was no big deal. "You could have asked," I snapped. "This isn't your moment to just show up and play dad when it's convenient." He looked taken aback, like the thought of asking permission had never crossed his mind. "I just wanted to support you," he said softly. The tension hung heavy between us until my name was called. I let him stay for the appointment, mostly because I didn't have the energy to argue. But even as the doctor pointed out the baby's tiny hands and heartbeat on the screen, I couldn't shake the feeling that Luke's presence wasn't about me or the baby. It was about his own guilt. At night, the loneliness hit the hardest. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the past year over and over in my head. Had I missed the signs? I thought about all the times Anna had casually asked how Luke was doing, or the moments she dropped by unannounced when we were still married. She always had some excuse, returning something she borrowed, needing advice about work. But now, in hindsight, it all felt calculated. Then there was Luke. I remembered the times he'd been distant toward the end of our marriage, the way he'd brush off my questions about where he'd been or why he'd seemed distracted. Had it already started then? Or was I just looking for patterns in the chaos? The not knowing was the worst part. It felt like I'd been blindsided not just by their engagement, but by the realization that my entire sense of reality might have been a lie. How long had I been the outsider in my own life? One night, as I lay in bed, staring at the faint glow of the moonlight on the ceiling, I felt something I hadn't felt before, a tiny, fluttering movement low in my abdomen. I froze, placing a hand on my belly, waiting to see if it would happen again. And then it did, a small, undeniable kick. Tears sprang to my eyes, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of anger or sadness. They were tears of joy, of wonder. I whispered into the quiet, "Hi there, little one." For that brief moment, all the pain and betrayal faded into the background. It was just me and this tiny, miraculous life growing inside me, a life that was mine to protect and cherish. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to let Anna and Luke's betrayal overshadow the joy of becoming a mom. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into preparing for the baby. I decorated the nursery, picked out clothes and toys, and started a journal to document the milestones. Every kick and hiccup became a reminder of what really mattered, the future I was building with my child. Anna continued to text, but her messages became less frequent. I think she realized I wasn't ready to talk, and maybe she finally understood that this wasn't something that could be fixed with an apology. Luke, however, didn't let up. He seemed determined to stay involved, whether I liked it or not. "I want to be a part of this," he said during one phone call. "You already are," I replied coldly. "You're the father. But that doesn't mean you get to act like everything's fine." "I'm trying," he said, his voice pleading. "I know I've made mistakes, but I don't want to lose this chance to be there for my child." I didn't respond. His words didn't erase the hurt he'd caused, but I couldn't deny that the baby would need both parents. The thought of co-parenting with him felt impossible, but I didn't have the luxury of running away. By the time I hit my third trimester, the loneliness hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. I was no longer consumed by the anger and betrayal. Instead, I was focused on the life ahead of me. The sleepless nights, the first smiles, the milestones I'd get to share with my baby. One day, as I was organizing baby clothes, I found myself smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. It wasn't a big, life-altering moment, but it was a step, a small reminder that I was stronger than the pain I'd been carrying. I still didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I wasn't alone. I had my baby, and together, we were going to face whatever came next. About a month after the dinner disaster, when I was finally starting to regain some semblance of emotional balance, Luke and Anna reached out. They wanted to meet, they said, for a civil discussion. At first, I ignored their messages, assuming it was more of the same half-hearted apologies or Anna's desperate attempts to salvage our sisterhood. But then Luke called and left a voicemail, saying they had something important to discuss and that it would benefit the baby's future. The mention of the baby made me pause. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. I convinced myself it was an olive branch, maybe even a genuine attempt to apologize. Deep down, I knew better, but I wanted to believe they were capable of a shred of decency. When I walked into the cafe, they were already seated at a corner table. Anna waved hesitantly, her smile strained. Luke stood as I approached, offering a half-hearted hi before gesturing for me to sit. I glanced between them, instantly sensing that something was off. There was a tension in the air that went beyond our usual awkwardness. After some initial small talk, Anna asking about the baby, Luke commenting on the weather, they exchanged a glance, as if silently deciding who would take the lead. Anna cleared her throat and leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "We've been thinking," she began, her voice soft and deliberate, "about the baby." I stiffened, every muscle in my body on high alert. "What about the baby?" She hesitated, her eyes flicking to Luke for reassurance before continuing. "We want to help," she said carefully. "We were wondering if you'd consider letting us raise the baby." At first, her words didn't register. I stared at her, convinced I must have misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Luke jumped in, his tone measured and annoyingly calm. "We know this is a lot to ask, but hear us out. You're going to be a single mom. It's going to be hard. We're in a stable position, and we can provide the baby with everything it needs." I blinked, my mind struggling to process what I was hearing. "You want to raise my baby?" Anna leaned closer, her expression pleading. "It would stay in the family," she said, as if that was supposed to make it better. "You wouldn't be completely cut off. We'd want you to still be a part of its life, of course." My blood boiled. The audacity, the sheer entitlement, left me speechless. "You've got to be kidding me," I finally said, my voice shaking. Anna rushed to explain, her words tumbling out in a desperate stream. "We just want what's best for the baby. You're already under so much stress, and we thought this could be a way to take some of the pressure off you. It's not about taking the baby away. It's about making sure it has a stable, loving home. And you think I can't provide that?" I snapped, my voice rising. Heads turned in the cafe, but I didn't care. "That's not what we're saying," Luke interjected, his tone frustratingly calm. "We're just trying to be realistic. You're going to have a lot on your plate. We want to help." I stared at them, my heart pounding in my chest. "Help? You want to help by taking my child away from me? By playing house with my baby while I visit on weekends like some kind of distant aunt?" "It's not like that," Anna said, her voice trembling. "We just think this would be best for everyone. For the family's sake." "For the family's sake?" I repeated, incredulous. "You mean your sake?" The conversation quickly devolved into a heated argument. I accused them of trying to manipulate me, of using my pregnancy as an excuse to fix their twisted version of family. Anna started crying, insisting that she loved me and was only trying to help. Luke, ever the mediator, tried to de-escalate, but his calm demeanor only made me angrier. "You don't get to do this," I said through gritted teeth, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the table. "You don't get to destroy my marriage, betray me, and then turn around and act like you're the saviors of this child. This is my baby, not yours. And I will do whatever it takes to make sure you stay as far away from us as possible." Luke sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We're just asking you to think about it. That's all. No pressure." "No pressure?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You're asking me to hand over my child, and you think adding no pressure makes it better?" I stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This conversation is over." Anna reached for my hand as I turned to leave, her tearful eyes pleading with me to stay. "Please, just think about it," she begged. I yanked my hand away. "I have thought about it, and the answer is no." As I walked out of the cafe, my heart raced with a mix of fury and disbelief. Their audacity was beyond anything I could have imagined. They weren't just asking for forgiveness, they were asking for my child, like it was some kind of bargaining chip to fix the fractured family they created. When I got home, I locked the door and sank onto the couch, my hands still shaking. I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about the baby anymore. It was about control, about their twisted idea of what family should look like. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them push me any further. This was my baby, and I was going to protect it, no matter what. Luke leaned forward, his hands clasped together in what I could only assume was his attempt at looking sincere. "Think about it," he said, his tone calm, almost patronizing. "You're going to be a single mom. It's going to be hard, and we're in a good position to give the baby a stable home. It would stay in the family, and we could make sure it has everything it needs." I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. Did he really think I'd hand over my baby because he and Anna were in a better position? The audacity, the sheer entitlement, left me speechless. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. You're offering to buy my child? I spat, my voice louder than I intended. Heads turned from nearby tables, but I didn't care. Anna's face flushed red, and she shook her head quickly. No, that's not what we mean, she stammered. We want to help. For the family's sake. For the family's sake? I repeated, my voice dripping with incredulity. You mean for your sake? So you can play house and pretend my child is some kind of bandage for this mess you've created? Luke sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not like that, he said, his voice frustratingly calm. This isn't about us. It's about the baby. We just want to make sure it has the best life possible. And you think I can't provide that? I snapped, leaning forward. You think because I'm single, I'm automatically incapable of giving my child a good life? You're unbelievable. Anna reached for my hand, but I pulled it away before she could touch me. We know you're upset, she said, her voice trembling. But you have to understand, we're thinking about what's best for everyone. You're going to have so much on your plate, and we're just trying to take some of the pressure off. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and hollow. Pressure? You think this is about pressure? This is about you two thinking you have the right to take my baby and raise it like it's yours. Do you even hear yourselves? We're not trying to take the baby away from you, Luke said, his tone defensive now. We'd want you to be part of its life. You'd still be the mother, just in a different way. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. A different way? I repeated, my voice shaking with fury. Like what? Some kind of aunt figure? A visitor in my own child's life? No, absolutely not. Anna started crying, her tears falling silently as she whispered, Please, just think about it. I glared at her, the anger coursing through me, making it impossible to feel any sympathy. I have thought about it, I said, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling beneath the surface. And the answer is no. 1,000 times no. This is my baby, not yours. You don't get to play happy family with my child just because you're feeling guilty or insecure. Luke leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. We're just trying to help, he said, his voice clipped. You don't have to make this harder than it already is. I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. Oh, I'm the one making it hard? Let me tell you something, Luke. You made this hard the second you decided to start a relationship with my sister. You made it hard when you sat there and thought, hey, let's see if we can convince her to give us her baby. Don't you dare put this on me. The tension at the table was suffocating. I could feel the stares of the other patrons, but I didn't care. My focus was on the two people in front of me, the people who had betrayed me in ways I hadn't thought possible and were now trying to strip me of the one thing I had left. I'm done here, I said, grabbing my bag. Don't contact me again unless it's about something important. And by important, I don't mean this ridiculous, disgusting offer. Anna stood up, her tear-streaked face full of desperation. Please, don't leave like this, she begged. We just want what's best for everyone. I turned to her, my voice cold. What's best for everyone? Maybe start by respecting me as this child's mother. Because that's who I am, not you. The drive home was a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel, and I could barely catch my breath. Every word they'd said replayed in my head, each one more infuriating than the last. For the family's sake. The phrase echoed in my mind, taunting me. How dare they act like this was some noble, selfless gesture? They weren't thinking about the baby or the family. They were thinking about themselves, about creating a life that let them ignore the damage they'd caused. When I got home, I locked the door and sank onto the couch, the exhaustion of the confrontation washing over me. I placed a hand on my belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements beneath my palm. It's just us, I whispered. And I promise you, I'll protect you from this. As much as I wanted to block them both from my life entirely, I knew it wasn't that simple. Luke was still the father, and legally, he had rights. I couldn't ignore that, no matter how much I wanted to. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me. This was my child, my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me, no matter how well-meaning they pretended to be. I left that cafe like a storm brewing, silent at first, but with every step, my fury intensified. By the time I reached my car, my chest was tight, and my hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. The sheer arrogance of their offer was staggering. They thought they could take my child, as if I were a surrogate they could pay off or a problem they could solve. It wasn't just insulting, it was dehumanizing. I slammed the car door shut and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel and staring blankly out the windshield. My mind raced with every vile thing they'd said, every condescending word cloaked in feigned concern. For the family's sake? As if stripping me of my baby was some noble act. The audacity made my stomach churn. I had to remind myself to breathe. I couldn't let them have that kind of power over me. But even as I drove home, the conversation played on a loop in my mind. Anna's pleading face, Luke's infuriating calm, the way they both spoke to me as if I were too fragile, too incompetent to raise my own child. That night, I took out my phone, scrolled to their names, and blocked both their numbers without hesitation. I didn't want to hear their justifications or their pitiful excuses. There was no coming back from this. They had crossed a line I hadn't even known existed. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone in my hand. It felt like a symbolic act, cutting them off like that, but it didn't feel like enough. Their words had already wormed their way into my mind, planting seeds of doubt that I didn't want to acknowledge. Would I be a good mother? Could I give my child the life it deserved? I knew those doubts were exactly what they'd been counting on. Their entire pitch hinged on the assumption that I was weak, that I wasn't enough. But that just made me angrier. No, I said out loud, my voice firm even though no one was there to hear it. I am enough, and this baby is mine. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I kept replaying the confrontation in my head, coming up with better, sharper comebacks I wished I'd said. I ranted to my best friend, Jenna, who listened with wide eyes and a steady stream of expletives directed at Luke and Anna. They're unhinged, Jenna said, shaking her head. Seriously, who does that? It's like they think they're living in some soap opera where they can just rewrite the rules and get away with it. Exactly, I said, pacing the room. They think they're being so selfless, like they're doing me a favor. But it's not about me. It's about them trying to fix their twisted version of a happy family. Jenna crossed her arms, her expression serious. You need to protect yourself and the baby. Legally, I don't trust them not to try something else. Her words hit me like a bucket of cold water. I hadn't even considered the possibility that they might escalate. But she was right. This wasn't just a personal betrayal anymore. It was something I needed to handle carefully. The next morning, I made an appointment with a family lawyer. Sitting in that office, explaining the situation to a stranger, felt surreal. I half expected the lawyer to laugh, to tell me I was being dramatic. But instead, she nodded seriously as I spoke, jotting down notes. You're not overreacting, she said firmly. This is your child, and you have every right to set boundaries. But you're right to be cautious. If your ex is insistent on staying involved, it's better to have everything in writing. Custody agreements, visitation schedules, whatever it takes to protect you and your baby. By the time I left her office, I felt a strange mix of relief and unease. I wasn't used to thinking about Luke as a potential threat. For all his faults, he'd always seemed reasonable, until now. Blocking them wasn't enough, though. I needed to make it clear that this wasn't up for debate. I drafted an email, careful to keep my tone measured but firm. Luke and Anna, your recent behavior has crossed a line, and I need to be very clear. My child is not up for negotiation. Any further attempts to interfere in this way will be met with legal action. Luke, I understand you want to be involved as the baby's father, and we can discuss custody arrangements after the birth. But Anna, you have no place in this discussion, and I will not tolerate further oversteps. Respect my boundaries, or you will no longer be a part of my life, or my child's. I read the email over several times before hitting send. My heart raced as I watched it disappear into the ether, but I didn't regret a single word. That night, I lay in bed with my hand on my belly, feeling the baby's faint movements. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Luke and Anna dictate my life, or my child's. This wasn't just about setting boundaries. It was about drawing a line in the sand and standing my ground. And if they dared to cross it again, they'd learn exactly how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. News of Luke and Anna's outrageous offer spread through our family like wildfire, and predictably, opinions were all over the place. My mom was the first to call after hearing about it, her voice full of concern. Anna told me you stormed out of the cafe, she said, clearly trying to sound neutral. What happened? I let out a hollow laugh. What happened? Mom, they asked me to let them raise my baby. They sat there with straight faces and said it would be for the family's sake. There was a long pause before she said, I'm sure they didn't mean it that way. Then how exactly did they mean it? I snapped, the anger bubbling to the surface again. Mom sighed. the kind of weary sigh that signaled she was bracing herself for a difficult conversation. I'm not saying what they did was right, but maybe you're being too hard on them. Anna loves you, and she probably thought she was offering a solution to help you. A solution to what? I demanded. I'm not some helpless charity case, Mom. I'm perfectly capable of raising my own child. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to take over, plain and simple. That conversation set the tone for the weeks that followed. Everyone in the family seemed to have an opinion, and few were shy about sharing it. My Aunt Carol called me the next day, firmly on my side. Don't let them bully you, she said, her voice sharp. What they did was manipulative and cruel. They've already hurt you enough, and now they're trying to make you feel like you're not capable. It's disgusting. Hearing her say that was a relief. For a moment, I felt like I wasn't crazy, like maybe I wasn't overreacting. But for every Carol, there was someone else who thought I was blowing things out of proportion. They were just trying to help, my cousin Sarah said during a family Zoom call. Maybe they didn't go about it the right way, but their hearts were probably in the right place. I muted myself before I could say something I'd regret. Their hearts were in the right place? That was laughable. Luke and Anna weren't thinking about me or the baby. They were thinking about how they could salvage their twisted version of a family and sweep their betrayal under the rug. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around, the tension in the family had reached a boiling point. My mom insisted on hosting, despite my protests that it was a terrible idea. We're still a family, she said. We need to find a way to move forward. The dinner started off tense and only got worse as the night went on. Every conversation felt like walking on eggshells, with everyone tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. I could feel Anna's eyes on me every time I spoke, but I refused to look at her. Finally, after dessert, she cornered me in the hallway. Can we talk? She asked, her voice small and hesitant. I crossed my arms, staring her down. What do you want, Anna? She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I never meant to hurt you, she said. I want what's best for everyone. I hate that things have gotten so bad between us. Her words made my stomach turn. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so no one else could hear. If you want what's best for everyone, start by respecting me as this child's mother. Because that's what I am, Anna. Not you. Me. She flinched at the coldness in my tone, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to sugarcoat things for her sake. I know that, she said quickly. I do. I miss you. I miss us. I let out a bitter laugh. You miss us? Maybe you should have thought about that before you got involved with my husband. After that, I avoided Anna for the rest of the night. My mom tried to bring us together for a group photo, but I waved her off. Not tonight, I said, my voice tight. The drive home was quiet, the baby kicking softly as if to remind me that I wasn't alone. As much as the family drama hurt, it didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. What mattered was this baby, this life I was about to bring into the world. The fallout from Luke and Anna's betrayal had fractured the family in ways I hadn't expected. Some people took sides, while others tried to stay neutral, but the damage was done. Trust was broken, and I wasn't sure it could ever be fully repaired. As I pulled into my driveway, I placed a hand on my belly and took a deep breath. It's just us, I whispered. And that's enough. I knew there would be more battles ahead, more conversations I didn't want to have. But for now, I was done trying to make everyone else happy. This wasn't about the family. It was about me and my baby, and I was determined to protect that future, no matter what. The fallout from Thanksgiving left me more certain than ever that I couldn't trust Luke or Anna. Not with my baby, not with anything. It wasn't just their audacious offer to raise my child that haunted me. It was the way they'd spoken to me, as if I was incapable, as if they had a right to decide what was best for my child. It was their arrogance, their sense of entitlement, that convinced me I needed to take precautions. I spent a sleepless night scrolling through forums and reading horror stories about custody battles. Even though Luke hadn't outright threatened to fight for custody, I couldn't shake the feeling that he and Anna weren't done trying to interfere. I needed to protect myself and my baby before they tried to push their agenda any further. The next morning, I called a family lawyer. The receptionist's voice was calm and professional as she scheduled my consultation, but my hands still shook as I wrote down the appointment details. This wasn't a step I ever thought I'd need to take. When I married Luke, I imagined a life where we were partners, where we'd navigate parenting together. But that dream had crumbled, and now I was sitting in a lawyer's office, explaining why I didn't trust the father of my child to respect my boundaries. The lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Karen Marks, listened intently as I laid out the situation. I tried to stay calm, but as I recounted Luke and Anna's cafe ambush, My voice shook with anger and disbelief. They sat there and asked me to let them raise my child, I said, my hands clenched into fists, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. They even had the nerve to say it was for the family's sake. Karen's expression remained neutral, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notepad. Well, she said finally, the good news is, as the child's biological mother, you have significant rights. But the bad news is, if Luke decides to assert his rights as the father, things could get complicated, especially if he's being influenced by Anna. The thought of Anna having any say in my baby's life made my stomach churn. What can I do to make sure that doesn't happen? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Karen nodded. There are a few steps we can take. First, we'll draft a parenting plan. It will outline custody arrangements, visitation schedules, and decision-making responsibilities. If Luke tries to push for more involvement than you're comfortable with, we'll have a framework to fall back on. She paused, giving me a moment to absorb the information before continuing. Second, I recommend documenting everything. Any texts, emails, or interactions that show their attempts to undermine you or overstep boundaries, keep a record. If we need to go to court, that documentation could be crucial. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. It was comforting to know I had options, but the idea of going to court against Luke was overwhelming. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the process. Karen helped me draft a detailed parenting plan, one that made it clear I would be the primary caregiver. Luke would have visitation rights, but only under specific conditions. I was determined to keep Anna out of the picture entirely. Legally, Anna has no standing, Karen assured me during one of our meetings. She's not the child's biological parent, and she's not married to Luke yet. Her involvement is purely contingent on his access to the child. That was a small comfort, but it didn't erase my anxiety. Luke and Anna had already proven they were willing to push boundaries. I couldn't shake the fear that they'd find a way to manipulate the situation. To prepare for any potential conflict, I started documenting everything. I saved every text message and email, even the ones that seemed benign. I wrote down every conversation I had with Luke and Anna, noting dates, times, and key details. It felt tedious and paranoid, but Karen insisted it was necessary. This isn't about being petty, she said during one of our calls. It's about protecting your rights as a mother. If they try to twist the narrative, you'll have the evidence to back up your side of the story. In the middle of all this, Luke reached out again. He wanted to meet, to talk about the baby, but I refused. Anything you have to say can go through my lawyer, I told him firmly. Come on, he said, his tone exasperated. We don't need lawyers. We're adults. We can work this out on our own. I almost laughed. The nerve of him, acting like I was the unreasonable one. Luke, if you were capable of respecting me as the mother of this child, we wouldn't need lawyers. But you've shown me exactly where you stand. So no, we're not doing this your way. I hung up before he could respond, my heart racing. Every interaction with him felt like a battle, but I refused to back down. By the time my due date approached, I felt more prepared, legally at least. I had a plan in place, a lawyer on my side, and a clear understanding of my rights. But emotionally, I was still on edge. One night, as I sat in the nursery folding tiny onesies, I thought about the life I wanted to create for my baby. It wasn't just about protecting them from Luke and Anna. It was about building a future filled with love, stability, and respect. Placing a hand on my belly, I whispered, "We're going to be okay. I promise." And for the first time in months, I started to believe it. The last few weeks of pregnancy were a whirlwind. Between doctor's appointments, finalizing the parenting plan with my lawyer, and navigating the lingering tension with my family, I barely had time to catch my breath. But as my due date approached, all the noise started to fade. My focus narrowed to one thing: meeting my baby. I'd imagined the moment 1,000 times. The first cry, the warmth of his tiny body in my arms. Those thoughts carried me through sleepless nights and waves of anxiety. No matter how messy everything else felt, I knew that once he arrived, nothing else would matter. The day finally came in the middle of a cold December night. I woke to a sharp, unmistakable pain and knew instantly it was time. My hospital bag had been packed for weeks, so I grabbed it, called Jenna, and headed to the hospital. Labor was long and grueling, a haze of pain and exhaustion broken only by the steady encouragement of Jenna and the nurses. Luke texted me twice during the ordeal, messages I didn't bother to read, let alone respond to. This moment was mine, and I wasn't about to let him or anyone else intrude on it. When my son was finally born, the world seemed to stop. The nurse placed him on my chest, and the weight of him, the warmth, the tiny cries, the miracle of his existence, brought tears streaming down my face. He was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a head full of soft, dark hair. I traced the curve of his cheek with my finger, marveling at the life I'd brought into the world. All the drama, the betrayal, the hurt, it all melted away. None of it mattered in that moment. All I could think about was him. "Hi, baby," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm your mom." Jenna leaned over, her own eyes glistening with tears. "He's beautiful," she said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. Holding him in my arms, I felt a surge of determination unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This was my son, my priority, my world, and I would do whatever it took to protect him. The next few days in the hospital were a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and visitors. My mom came by, holding him like he was made of glass and cooing over his every movement. She tried to bring up Anna, but I shut it down immediately. "I don't want to talk about her," I said firmly. "This is about me and the baby. That's it." She looked like she wanted to argue, but wisely let it go. Luke showed up once, but I refused to see him. The nurses told me he'd left a gift, a small stuffed bear and a card, but I didn't open it. He hadn't earned the right to be part of this moment, not after everything he and Anna had put me through. As much as I wanted to keep the world at bay, reality began to creep back in as I prepared to leave the hospital. The parenting plan was still fresh in my mind, and I knew the peaceful bubble I'd created around my son wouldn't last forever. Luke had rights, and I would have to face him eventually, but not yet. When I brought my son home for the first time, it felt like stepping into a new life. The nursery I'd spent months preparing was finally complete, filled with soft blankets, baby clothes, and little touches of love. I laid him in his crib, watching as he yawned and stretched, completely oblivious to the world around him. As I sat beside him, the weight of everything hit me. I wasn't just a single mom navigating a complicated family dynamic. I was his entire world, his source of love and safety. And while the road ahead felt daunting, I knew I was ready for it. I thought about Luke, about Anna, about all the ways they tried to undermine me and insert themselves into my life. They didn't matter anymore, not in the way they thought they did. This wasn't about them. This was about my son and the life I was building for us. "Welcome home, little one," I whispered, brushing a kiss against his forehead. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The chaos might not be over, but in that moment, everything felt exactly as it should. Bringing my son home was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I had to decide how to handle the fractured relationships that still loomed in the background. Luke and Anna had both reached out multiple times since the birth, but I couldn't bring myself to engage with either of them. Their betrayal had cut too deep, and the audacity of their actions left scars I wasn't ready or willing to let heal. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I couldn't keep them in my life. Luke might have rights as the baby's father, but his choices had shown me exactly where his priorities lay. And Anna? She had forfeited her role as my sister the moment she pursued a relationship with my husband. I didn't owe them anything, not my time, not my forgiveness, and certainly not access to the peaceful life I was trying to create for my son. So, I made the decision to cut contact. It wasn't easy. There was a part of me that still grieved the loss of the relationships I thought I had. The loving sister, the supportive partner. But those were illusions. The people I trusted the most had shown their true colors, and I couldn't ignore that. I started by setting firm boundaries with Luke. Through my lawyer, I outlined clear terms for visitation. Limited, supervised visits arranged on my terms. I made it clear that Anna was not to be involved in any way. She might have been Luke's fiancée, but she wasn't a parent, and I wasn't going to let her play a role in my son's life. Luke pushed back at first, trying to argue for more involvement. "I just want to be a father to my son," he said in one email, as if that absolved him of everything else he'd done. "You should have thought about that before you tried to undermine me as his mother," I replied through my lawyer. Eventually, he seemed to accept the boundaries I'd put in place. The visits were awkward at first, a stark reminder of how far we'd fallen from the life we'd once envisioned together. But I kept them strictly about my son, refusing to engage in any personal conversations or attempts to clear the air. Luke had made his bed, and I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of pretending everything was fine. Anna, on the other hand, was a harder issue to resolve. She continued to text and call, alternating between apologies and pleas to fix things. Every time I saw her name on my phone, I felt a fresh wave of anger and sadness. She didn't get it. She didn't understand that some things couldn't be fixed. The final straw came when she sent a long, emotional email, saying she missed me and hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her. "You're my sister," she wrote. "I know I made mistakes, but we're family. We shouldn't let this come between us." I stared at the email for a long time before deleting it. Her words meant nothing. Family wasn't about blood. It was about trust, respect, and support, things she'd thrown away the moment she chose Luke over me. As the weeks turned into months, I focused on building a new life for myself and my son. Jenna remained my rock, stepping into the role I'd once thought Anna would fill. My mom softened over time, finally understanding why I needed to set the boundaries I had. Most importantly, I found strength in motherhood. Every time my son smiled or reached for me, I was reminded of why I was doing this. He deserved a life free from the toxicity of Luke and Anna's choices. He deserved to grow up surrounded by people who loved and respected him and me. One day, as I was rocking him to sleep, I thought about what I wanted his future to look like. I wanted him to know that family isn't defined by titles or bloodlines. It's about the people who show up, who love you unconditionally, and who fight for your happiness. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "It's just us, baby, and we're going to be okay." Sometimes, family isn't about blood. It's about the people who truly support and respect you. And I was ready to build a family on my own terms, one rooted in love, trust, and strength. Luke and Anna had tried to rewrite my story, but they didn't get the final word. This was my life, my son, and our future, and we were going to thrive.